Greetings, everybody. We are in Hague, Netherlands at the Honeywell User Group, and I'm here with Louis Sweet, the General Manager for Sustainable Fuel and Chemicals at Honeywell International. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you talk to a lot of people about sustainability. Maybe let's start with what's the one metric that every manufacturer should track to know if their sustainability efforts are truly working?
Yeah, I really think that the product level carbon intensity should be a single point of measure here. The difficulty is finding a way to do CO2 equivalency per unit of energy per megajoule is impossible, right? It's not something you can go in and actually measure with an instrument. It's not something like an octane or a calorie where you have a way to scientifically measure it in a regular routine basis. So it's a bit of a mystery right now, and it's a bit of a challenge for the whole industry because we know that this is something that we want to be able to measure because it will eventually have like a market value or a premium for our products. But to do it in a verifiable and ethical way is challenging.
Got it. Now, you talk about carbon. Maybe where do most decarbonization projects in the industrial settings break down between the strategy and the execution?
Yeah, I think it's all about the money, right? You've got to at the world scale that we're usually interacting with our end users, customers. Um, you've got to have a way to gather that investment and then pay that back. And for a long time, we haven't really had to introduce new technology in that space as a society, right? I'm not saying Honeywell specific technology. I'm just saying, look, we know how to make gasoline. We've made gasoline for a long time. Even Honeywell UOP invented unleaded gasoline, and so we've been in that supply chain for a while. But now, as we start to transition energy, and we are looking at energy scarcity dynamics, and we're looking at lower carbon molecules, we start to introduce a lot of technology and a lot of innovation, which is fantastic. But it's very hard to then justify how long is this going to last, how long is this going to stay relevant before maybe the next thing. And so just the stability that we're used to having on a single piece of technology, being able to risk profile it and things like that is becoming challenging. And
Got it.
yeah, and that's kind of where the automation piece comes in too.
So let's talk about that. When plants shift to lower carbon feedstock, what operation challenge do leaders usually underestimate, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think let's see. There's a couple of things really. When we look at something like SAF, for example, sustainable aviation fuel, availability of feedstock becomes really interesting. If you set up a SAF plant for beef tallow, and then all of a sudden the ranch and farm that you built next to changes its profile, or the availability of that waste product doesn't exist any longer, then your whole economic viability might change. And that's true for everything. That's true for low carbon electricity. That's true for low carbon used cooking oil and rapeseed oil and anything. Like there's a lot of world economics that can kind of dictate the availability of that feedstock, which is a lot different than just pulling oil out of the ground.
Got it. Now, I want to close with maybe one recent lesson that changed how you think about scaling sustainability.
That's a good question. I think when we I think data centers becomes an interesting thing to start to look at, right? Because and I said this a little bit earlier today as well, but our former CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Gavin Towler, he taught me this many years ago. In a refinery, we use a BTU 5 to 7 times, right? A single thermal unit, we reuse that heat, reuse that heat, reuse that heat. We know in data centers, they're using that heat unit maybe 1 time, maybe 2 times, but they're not at that 7 yet, right? And so interacting with different industries that haven't necessarily thought like the molecular industries and teaching them lessons and sharing the lessons that we've had in these long-standing industries into more newer emergent industries. Like that becomes a really interesting thing in my opinion, is because there's so much synergy between the different segments and the different investors and the different technologies, but we could eventually share it, right? And so having a single unit of measure like a carbon intensity could apply to pharma and discrete manufacturing and data centers and renewable fuels, all the same. And those lessons can also be shared. And for us in the automation world, right, that becomes a basis that we can use. We can learn how to optimize pharma and then translate that into steel and then translate that into cement. And so even though they're quite still disparate industries, as we move to decarbonization and have a higher dependency on the electron, these will all start to kind of operate in similar ways.
Sounds like a lot of opportunities in data center for learning from other industries. So look forward to the updates, perhaps even on a roadmap from Honeywell and how you solve that problem in the future. So appreciate the insights. And if you have questions, feel free to leverage the hashtag you see on the screen, and we'll get Louis or somebody on his team to answer the questions.
Great. Thanks for letting me have this time, Lucian. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.